Hello, Bravo bosses. This is the Bravo Investigator Podcast. I'm your host, Dana, and today we are talking about House of Stassi episodes 1 and 2. Let's get into it. Happy Friday, everyone. I hope everyone's had a great week and is looking forward to the weekend. I know that I am. I am a little angry this morning, I'm going to be honest, because I have already recorded this episode today at 7 a.m. I took the time to get up early, record the episode, do the damn thing, make sure this was going to be out to you guys before I started work. And then what happened? Some sort of audio mishap where, like, the sound was coming out of the wrong surface and there was all of this feedback. I was like, oh, I can't put this out. I tried to look into figure out ways to get rid of the noise, but I was like, oh, everyone's gonna get mad at me. You could literally hear like the repetition of what I was saying, like in the background. So I am mad. Like, you guys have no idea how much work these episodes take sometimes, especially when we have so many other things going on. I have another podcast, I have a full-time job, and I think I have the flu. I don't feel so well. And by the way, sorry I look so gross today. I just took a shower. I was off work yesterday, throwing up, had the chills, all this stuff. I'm not feeling great, but I wanted to make sure I was here to talk to you guys today about House of Stassi twice. Oh, I'm so mad, you guys. You have no idea. I literally got my computer started to work at 8 and I was like, wait a minute. This House of Stassi episode is bad. I'm gonna need to re-record. So I'm taking my lunch break for work at the beginning of the day, re-recording this for you guys, and gonna get it out to you. But yeah, I'm pretty pissed about it. I'm not gonna lie. Like, it's so much work to then like throw away an episode and start again. So happy Friday, everyone. I hope you're doing well. I'm doing mediocre. Just to let you guys know what the schedule is going to be from now on, I think we're going to be doing our Monday reality roundup as per usual, which is basically all the reality TV news that's going on in all of our favorite reality TV shows, not just Bravo. We talk Love is Blind, Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, Married at First Sight, Teen Mom, all the news, all the things. Then I think on Fridays, just based on how the schedule looks, is when I'm going to be getting you guys House of Stassi. And Saturdays will be Married at First Sight, which is such a fire season this year. I'm going to have a great episode coming out tomorrow covering episodes 7 to 9 with Rupert the Baxter, who's been on the podcast before. Absolutely love him. So it's going to be a great episode. And I wanted to give you guys like a little special announcement about the Bravo Investigator podcast. Here's the announcement. The Bravo Investigator podcast has now partnered with Cloud 10. So I'm really excited about that. They are an amazing podcast network with like the best shows. They have Snarkbait, Reality Receipts, Up and Adam. She's speaking with Emily Hanks. Like, so many amazing shows that I personally love. And so I'm really excited to be partnering with them, collabing with them, working with them, and doing all of the things that I think will really, really help this show grow. So thank you to everyone who has been here since the jump, and even to the new people who are enjoying the show, because it is because of all of you that the show is going to be getting to where it is, and it is where it is today, and all of the things. So thank you guys so much. But I just wanted to share that with you guys because that was some really exciting news. And I think that's all I really wanted to share with you guys before we get into it. So let's start talking House of Stassi. And I want to preface this by saying I am recapping this show not because I am a Stassi stan. I watch reality TV for entertainment. And while, yes, I am a moral person and I do go off on these people many times based on the way that they carry themselves and their character, I've tried to take a step back because I really want to watch this show and I want to try to look at it through a different lens. I want to try to look at it through a lens of like, I'm not watching this because I love Stassi. I'm watching this because this is entertaining reality TV, and she is an entertaining reality TV character. Now, there was a time where I was a Stassi stan. Like, I even went to her live show that was in Toronto. She was doing a live podcast tour. This was just shy of her being canceled. This was like late 2019, and I got to do like the meet and greet and everything, and I was like this close to Beau's arm. It was so cool, I swear. Then she gets canceled, right? And everything changes. I'm not saying that people people can't learn and grow. And I think that she probably has in some ways, but at her core, she's always Stassi, right? She is, of all things, a really compelling reality TV character. And that is why I'm jazzed for this show. I'm also excited about the people that she has on the show, like Taylor Stricker, I'm a fan of, and we'll get into who all of the characters are. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to come at this from a perspective of like, we're just watching an entertaining reality TV show and looking at it from that perspective and less of a perspective of like good and bad and evil and wrong and all of these things. Do you know what I mean? So I don't think I'm going to be recapping this line by line, which is not how I do things anyways. We normally talk about major themes and plot points. That being said, the first two episodes didn't have a ton of that. It was more like character development. There was a little bit of plot points and themes that there are to talk about today. But for the most part, I'm not going to be doing this in the way that I typically do it, where we talk about a major theme or plot point, and then I kind of decide what side I'm on, because as I've gone through this, I don't think that I'm ever going to be able to side with her, or not that often. So we're going to be talking about things at more of like a face value, in a sense of like, this is what's going on and this is what we think of it, but less in like a psychological breakdown kind of way, because we already know that Stassi is who Stassi is. But anyways, let's get into it. We'll sort of figure this out as we go, because this is a really different type of reality TV show. Like, there are no walls, no fourth wall, no walls, right? We're already talking about the fact that we're all on a show, that we want so and so to come on the show, that this is a pilot, that we've been working on this for years, all of these things. So the style of this show, I would call like a lifestyle show that follows the lives of the people in them, almost like Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, where we're watching a show about a show. You're watching them do press and live out their daily lives as celebrities, I guess, or like the celebrity family. But the vibe that Stassi is trying to go for with this show is Kardashian like. Her goal is to be like Kris Jenner and to have all of her friends be as rich and famous as her so that they can do their own thing. But she wants to be able to continue what she's doing, all of the work that she's doing, and kind of take over the world, but with her family alongside her. So let's get into our characters. So we have Beau Clark, who is Stassi's husband. They met through Kristen and Katie. I think it was in either 2018 or 2019. And they have two children, Hartford and Messer. Beau takes care of the kids in the household and Stassi works. So I do think that that's an interesting element for us to be able to watch, the difference in power dynamics in the household and what that looks like and how that affects parenting, the marriage, and all of that. Then we have Georgie, who is Stassi's little sister. We don't know a ton about Georgie. We saw her sporadically on Vanderpump Rules, but she was basically she was married. I mean, I remember there being a period of time where Stassi was getting ready for her wedding. And then when we saw her on Vanderpump Villa, if you did end up watching Vanderpump Villa, we find out that she's bisexual and she's making out with everybody. So we do find out here that she has gotten divorced. So we gotten a little bit more context here. But what we also learn about Georgie is that she's sort of scattered. She doesn't have a life plan or a job or a dollar to her name. And then she kind of relies on Stassi for help a lot. Then we have Taylor Strecker, who is Stassi's best friend. You may know her from her podcast, Taste of Taylor. She's been in the podcast game for at least a decade with SiriusXM. She's a comedian. She tours with Stassi. So when I went and saw the live podcast tour, Taylor opened for her. Taylor was actually with a man for 8 years. They were married. They got a divorce. Then she realized she was a lesbian. She had no idea that she was before. And now she's married to a beautiful woman named Teddy, and they are having a baby. Then we have Rob. Rob is Beau's best friend. He's around 50, but he's still dating younger girls, living the party life, says that he wants to settle down, but is not really living that kind of lifestyle. Now, you may remember inklings of Rob or hearing about Rob in Vanderpump Rules. So do you remember when Beau proposed to Stassi at the cemetery? He actually had his friend Rob go and put the ring where Bo and Stassi were going to go do the proposal. So I remember Bo saying, I'm so worried that Stassi's either going to see Rob or Rob's going to put the ring in the wrong place. I'm not going to be able to find it. So that's Rob. Georgia, not Georgie, Georgia is Bo's sister. They met when he was 21. So they have the same father, but different mothers. She's from Italy. And apparently she's like really obsessed with Beau, which we do get a little bit from in Vanderpump Villa. The funny thing about Vanderpump Villa is like the way that House of Stassi seems to be flowing is in sequential order from what happened in Vanderpump Villa, almost assuming that everyone watched Vanderpump Villa, which like no one did. I watched pieces of it, right? But basically what we learned on that show was that Beau was interested in going back to work and didn't really love being a stay-at-home dad full time anymore. Um, Beau and Stassi end up getting in a fight about him not tattooing her name on him. Georgie and Georgia wanting to come live with Beau and Stassi without even asking first. So these are some of the themes that are still kind of pending and are now coming back into this show. But we start initially by just talking about how we got here. And remember, like I said, there are no walls on this show. So Stassi talks about this like it is what it is. She's like, well, you guys might know me from 8 seasons of Vanderpump Rules. And then in 2020, I was canceled. I accused Faith Stowers of doing something that she didn't do, called the cops on her, which was hella egregious. And this all happened when she was 9 weeks pregnant. So she basically got canceled at that time. And we've seen her sporadically on things like Vanderpump Villa. Um, she hosted the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives reunion. And so it sort of feels like Disney, Hulu, Freeform, we're trying to give her little bits. We're trying to find a way to test her almost in a way with the audience to see how the audience would feel about giving her a full-time show. So they gave her Secret Lives of Mormon Wives and the Tell Me Lies podcast and all of these things. It's interesting though, because I don't think she like thrived in necessarily any of those things, except maybe Vanderpump Villa, but nobody really watched that. But still, on the basis of all of that, they decided to give her like a test scene so that she'd be able to film like a test show. So we basically get that scene. We get to see that sort of pilot, that test scene that led to this. So we get like this group scene where everyone in the cast is sitting down, eating, drinking, hanging out, whatever. And we kind of pick up where we left off from Vanderpump Villa, where apparently the cast is now saying they felt triggered by what happened on Vanderpump Villa with Tattoo Gate. They feel like the storming off, the yelling, the threatening to divorce Beau was triggering. And Stassi thought, that her personal situations with her husband she didn't realize that her personal situations with her husband were affecting other people. In addition to that, she tries to really explain again where she was coming from with this tattoo thing, because when you look at it at face value, it seems ridiculous. What she is trying to say is like, I had two of his children, and then he looked at me dead in the eye and said, I would never get a tattoo of your name, despite having one with his sister Georgia, right? So in her head, this is more about like her doing so much for her giving birth to his children, but then to say like almost like, ew, I would never put a permanent stamp of your name on my body, is how she's taking it. She's still taking it way too far. But an interesting thing that comes out of this is Stassi saying that she kind of gets in her head when her friends and family come at her and make her the villain about things when she feels like she has spent the last 5 years really working on herself and doing a lot better. And then they're really only nitpicking the bad things about her. I don't know if that's so much the issue for her as it is how she's going to be portrayed on TV, because I feel like she went into this thinking my marriage is in a good place, my friendships are in a good place, people like me now, this is a good time for me, and then wasn't expecting to kind of come off poorly. And we don't know how she'll come off exactly yet. She's coming off hella selfish, but that's who she is. But I guess she was hoping that she would come off a little bit more liked, especially in terms of how her friends and family are treating her, and that's just like not necessarily the vibe. We get to see Stassi and Taylor go to Vegas for Alex Cooper's Unwell tour. And we get lots of scenes like this where we see Stassi living the life, right, of her work, her celebrity status, and all the things that she gets to do. Now, while she's there, she ends up checking in with Bo and she realizes that he really is like the best because the kids are screaming, going chaotic. He's taking care of it all. Now, I will give Stassi this because she makes a really good point here. She's like, yes, Bo may be at home with the kids, but men have historically spent all the time outside of the house. They have historically been the breadwinners, the providers, while women stayed home. It's our turn to leave the house. And I agree. I very much concur on that. So they end up hanging out with Jesse from The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, Jesse Draper. And there's just so many cameos in this show, which I love. You get all the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, the Love Thy Nader crew, even Marciano is there for like a second. So they're in Vegas having drinks with Jesse, and I actually thought Jesse was pretty close with Sheena, so I was surprised by this. But she kind of throws Sheena under the bus and says that Sheena said to Jesse and the other girls, like, "Listen, I'm done with Bravo, but do you guys have any like events coming up for your show? Because Brock grew up Mormon, so like maybe I could be on your show." And they're all like laughing and making fun of her and all this stuff. And I remember, what's her name? Not Saucy. Sheena talking about this. I remember Sheena talking about this on a podcast. It was either her podcast or somebody else's, but whoever was talking to her said, "Would you ever want to join the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives?" And she was like, "What are you talking about? I'm not Mormon. I don't live in Utah. I don't meet any of the criteria." And the person was like, "No, but like even if none of those things were a factor, would you like if all of those things were not issues?" She's like, "I don't know, it doesn't really make sense." So my initial thought was like Sheena was joking, but the way that Jesse portrayed it made it seem like Sheena was not joking. I also think it's hilarious that Sheena gets brought up twice in this series, given how much Stassi doesn't like her. She really is putting Sheena's name on the show, if you think about it, right? And putting her back in the zeitgeist and back in the news. So that's kind of funny. Stassi ends up talking about her weird falling out with Katie. Now, she feels like after she got fired, Katie Maloney, obviously, and Katie Maloney is going to be joining the show, so that's why this comes up. She's like, she sort of felt like after she got fired, Katie was all about herself and sort of self-involved. So she also felt like they had nothing in common anymore, so she kind of ghosted the friendship. Now, this is something that Stassi does, and I was really surprised that she did this with Katie, given their long-standing friendship. That being said, Stassi has done things like this to Katie before, back in season 4, when Katie went to Sheena's bachelorette party and didn't tell Stassi about it. Stassi basically ghosted her as well and didn't forgive her and was just, that's how she is. When she gets hurt, she cuts people. But I kind of thought that she had learned more about that since, you know what I mean? Like I thought she has done work on herself, and I thought that maybe she had grown in that regard and realized that that's not the proper way to navigate a friendship, to just like ghost or cut people off. It would behoove you to try to work on these friendships. And when she talks about them having nothing in common, I do get that. I do feel like friendships ebb and flow, and you're not always at the same stage in life, right? So Katie, at the time that we were talking about this, I think was single or just dating. Stassi was married with 2 kids. She was fired from Vanderpump Rules. Katie's entire life was Vanderpump Rules. So their lives were going in like 2 different directions. And it can be really difficult to get on the same page or even have something in common to talk about anymore, right? And sometimes that's just a stage of life thing and that can change, right? Like who knows if one day Katie will like get married and have kids and then they'll have like all the things to talk about. And I understand that Katie and Stassi are not in the same place that they were when they were in their 20s, when they had everything in common, right? Like that's why friendships ebb and flow and change. But for them not having anything in common, I mean, that's not a reason to ghost, right? I just feel like that's really disrespectful to someone that you had a long-standing friendship with. So Stassi decides to throw a Halloween party and invite Katie because she misses her and because she wants her to be part of this show. Stassi also hasn't talked to her sister Georgie since Vanderpump Villa, which is when Georgie said, "I want to come move in with you," and all of this. And what she was really most upset about was that there was no conversation about it. It was just sort of like an expectation. Now, typically on reality TV, we look at these parties and we're like, well, why are they having this party? And why are they inviting this person if they haven't spoken in so long? But now we don't even have to ask that question because we just know. And they don't even need to say it. We know that Katie is invited, even though they haven't spoken in like 2 years, so that they can hash this out. And Georgie is invited, even though Stassi and Georgie haven't spoken in a number of months, because Georgie is a cast member, and that's how it works. So I kind of like that veil sort of just being taken down. So it requires us to sort of ask less questions if you think about it. So this was really interesting to me. Bo is not a fan of Katie. Now, he was the one who introduced, or sorry, Katie and Kristen were the ones who introduced Bo and Stassi. So I sort of felt like he always had a soft spot for her. But he feels like he's very protective over his wife. He feels like there were periods of time where they were hanging out, Stassi and Katie. Stassi would come home and be really upset. And so he saw the way their friendship was affecting Stassi. And for that, he feels hesitant about them getting back to it into a friendship. He also made this really interesting comment about how he's worried if they were to become friends again, that Stassi would sort of would revert to her VPR ways because Katie is around. And I didn't love that. Like, love Bo, love me some Bo. But I feel like it's a little bit unfair to blame Stassi's behavior on Katie, especially in those later years when Bo was actually on the show, right? If we're talking about the time that Bo actually entered the zeitgeist. Katie was integral in trying to get Stassi to calm the fuck down, right? She was really trying to help her rein in her dark passenger because she wanted to see Stassi and Beau together. She took her to the Oracle of Los Angeles to try to get rid of the dark passenger. She tried to calm Stassi down when she was freaking out the night before her engagement, and she was like, give Beau a break. She was involved in the engagement. So I have always felt Katie to be a very calming force for Stassi and almost like a good compliment to her in terms of their personalities. So I was surprised to hear this, but I guess we'll get more information on this hopefully. Also at the party, Georgie decides to read a letter to Stassi that she wrote to her. It feels very performative, I will say. The letter is basically her saying how much she loves Stassi and wants to be in her life, but she sort of feels like Stassi uses her trauma against her and sort of turns things around on her. So, when she said that she wanted to come live with Stassi, Stassi's like, I paid for your divorce and I did all these things for you. And like, why can't you take care of yourself? And we do sort of see Stassi do the same thing here. She kind of turns the whole thing around and says, first of all, this sounds like ChatGPT wrote it. Second of all, this sounds like a you problem. Now, the thing about Stassi and Georgie is that I just feel like we don't have enough context for their relationship for us to form a true opinion, right? It does seem like Georgie is scattered, but for Stassi to be like the main stable force in the family doesn't jive with me. So I'm just very curious more about who Georgie is and more about Stassi and Georgie's relationship. I didn't know they ever had a contentious relationship, like based on the very little I knew from Vanderpump Rules. I thought that they were very close. So it does seem like there's some strife there. And it does seem sort of based on the fact that Georgie lives a very like la 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 type of lifestyle and expects Stassi to pick up the pieces. And it sort of seems like Stassi, not just with Georgie, but with everyone in her life, sort of feels like the caregiver and like she has to make sure everyone's okay because she's the one with the money. And that is part of the reason that she wanted to do this, so that all of her friends and family could become rich and famous and sort of lay off of her, which kind of makes sense. Um, Stassi and Katie end up getting together the next day because they don't end up really talking about this stuff at the party. And we get like a better explanation about what happened between the two of them. So Stassi explains that when she was fired, she had just had a baby and she felt like Katie never wanted to talk about Beau or Hartford or her family. And she only wanted to talk about Vanderpump Rules. And Stassi gives us an example of one time where she cried to Katie about like postpartum stuff, and Katie didn't seem to be paying attention. She was just scrolling on her phone. And then she showed her phone to Stassi and was like, look how great the sandwich shop is coming along. And she sort of felt like just Katie didn't care. Now, Katie felt like she was always a ride or die for Stassi. And when it comes to Vanderpump Rules, she didn't know anything else. That was like her whole life. For Stassi, though, she was hurt by being fired. So it was hard for her to hear about Vanderpump Rules all the time, which is understandable. Then apparently Katie invited Sheena to her birthday dinner and not Stassi. So Stassi was like, that was great. That was easy cut for me. I could cut you out of my life super easily because you know how I feel about Sheena. And I have to say, I'm not even sure why Stassi doesn't like Sheena at this point in time. I'm not even sure that Sheena is aware of that because I feel like whenever she's asked about Stassi, she's like, yeah, I see her at kids' birthday parties and stuff, and we're good. But for Stassi to be acting in the way where inviting Sheena somewhere means you're dead to her, that's so classic VPR. And I don't really know where that stemmed from. So I'm not sure if we're going to get more on that. She said that Katie invited Sheena and not Stassi, which is weird and definitely confusing. So I want more on that. But another interesting piece of this is it sort of seems like we're not talking about right after Stassi was fired because that was in like 2020. If we're talking about the sandwich shop and Sheena being invited to a birthday, that's within the last couple of years. And so when she's talking about postpartum and all of that, she must have been talking about Messer. So I feel like when she's talking about being fired and Katie only talking about Vanderpump Rules, she's really only talking about the last couple of years. So I don't know how she was able to maintain a friendship with Katie for so many years post Vanderpump Rules when that was all Katie was talking about. If, like, I'm just curious why Stassi decided to only end the friendship within the last couple of years and not much sooner because she's been off Vanderpump Rules for 6 years. So why did she decide to end the friendship with Katie sort of so late in the game? Or maybe it was just sort of building up for her. Like it was years and years and years of only hearing about Vanderpump Rules. But with the Vanderpump Rules of it all, I mean, they talk about this and how interesting this really is because Stassi feels like Katie went out a winner. And Katie's like, I mean, it took 11 seasons. Nobody liked me for 11 seasons, but there you go. But for Stassi, she feels like she went out a loser. She went out bad. And that's why, one of the reasons why she wants to do this show, because she wants to change like her legacy. But both women admit to being really hesitant about doing reality TV. And the way that they talk about Vanderpump Rules, I find so interesting. They basically talk about it as like a blessing where it's given them so many opportunities. And Stassi wouldn't even have the opportunity that she has today with House of Stassi if it hadn't have been for Vanderpump Rules. But Vanderpump Rules is also the kind of thing that is going to require her to do therapy for the rest of her life, which is the kind of thing that no one will understand unless you have been in it yourself, which is something that I feel will always bond her and Katie, right? Even if Katie never has kids or a husband and Stassi does, the one thing that'll always bond them is their trauma bond over Vanderpump Rules. And Stassi explains that the women were always made to look crazy, the men were always protected, and it sort of made darkness seem normal, and the darkness was also rewarded, right? And these are all things that we really know. So it was almost like a difficult dance for her, where it was like, it's almost like being in an abusive relationship where there's like benefits to it, but there's also cons to it. And it's like, should I leave it? Shouldn't I leave it? And so it must have been like a mind fuck, right? And I can really, really appreciate that. And I appreciate the toll that it took on them. I can only truly imagine. So then we move into episode 2, and Stassi's sister and Beau's sister are basically both moving in with Stassi. Georgia, as I mentioned earlier, stays with them when she is traveling from Italy. And Georgie is just like this starving artist. Now she comes to the house where she made this like beautiful dollhouse for Hartford, and Stassi just doesn't understand how Georgie can't turn these strange, I don't even know what to call them, talents, these strange talents into money. And I don't know that I agree. I don't know that necessarily that she could start like a dollhouse company, but yeah, she's basically a starving artist. She's here in LA to try to like work on that, but she's also kind of, I guess, an unstructured lost soul in a sense. Beau and Rob, as we mentioned earlier, are best friends. He is Hartford's godfather. However, we're in episode 2, and Beau and Rob apparently have not spoken in 9 months over, get this. So, Beau did not congratulate Rob on his team's win during football season. And when Rob got mad at Beau about this, Beau thought this was absolutely ridiculous. So he told Rob to grow up. And so they haven't spoken since. Now, Stassi loves Rob. She thinks that this is not about football, but she also makes the very good fourth wall point that it's really inconvenient when two cast members stop speaking. So it's funny how reality TV, in a way, can sometimes bring couples, or not couples, people together because who knows how long they would have gone without speaking if they hadn't have sort of been forced to for the sake of the show. Or same with Georgie and Stassi. They haven't spoken since Vanderpump Villa, but are now forced to for the sake of the show. So in some ways, you can see the benefits of reality TV in terms of creating and establishing and maintaining relationships, if you think about it. Um, so she really wants them to work it out, and we'll get to that later at a party. But yeah, I just really think this whole thing is kind of funny because men, right? It just seems like they're fighting over something so silly and stupid. And we look at so many of the fights that these women have gotten through in the past, and this just seems equally as trivial. But we'll come back to that. So Teddy and Taylor are taking a lactation course because they're having a baby. And Taylor is worried about reality TV affecting her marriage. And, it's really interesting because sometimes people go on reality TV to end their marriages. And I don't know that I would ever say that a reality TV show has ever strengthened a marriage. But I think a lot of these people went into it thinking we have such strong relationships that we're not going to allow this to break us. And I hope that's true, but it almost always does, right? So I do kind of worry for all of these people. I understand when they went into it thinking like this isn't going to shake us, this isn't going to break us, but who really knows? But I really just love Taylor as a character. She is so funny. She's sort of like the comic relief of the show in a way. Like she makes this hilarious joke to Teddy about how, because Teddy's currently pregnant, so the baby is living within her. And so she makes this joke about how Teddy and the baby are always leaving her out because they're one together. And then Taylor's like on the outside. So I think she's going to be really, really great for this show. But I'm also very curious as to whether Stassi and Taylor have ever had a falling out because Stassi seems obsessed with her. They've had a long-term relationship, like 10 years, and they're besties. But I've seen Stassi have a fallout with almost everyone. So I am curious if there's ever been anything with Taylor that has really grinded her gears to the point where she was not able to be friends with her for a point. We get to see Stassi do all of these really cool opportunities like hosting the Tell Me Lies podcast. Netflix is also putting her podcast on their platform. And when she's being told all of this at home, like there's basically a scene where she's getting her makeup done and they're sort of going over all of the opportunities. Bo brings up again that he wants to go back to work. And Stassi's like, look, you don't even need to go back to work. Like, look how much money we have, basically, is what she's saying. Netflix is taking us on. Like, come on. And he's like, no, I want to go back to work. And Stassi's like, I mean, I could pay you to not go back to work, which is honestly so demeaning and condescending. It makes it seem like I mean, she is the breadwinner of the family, but it doesn't mean that he doesn't have value. And so to treat him like you could just pay him to do things or not do things sort of seems like you don't respect him as like an equal partner. Do you know what I mean? We'll get into this more when he sort of breaks down about it a bit later. But he wants to go back to casting. He did casting for 17 years. He loved it. And for him, it's not about money. But for her, it is. For Stassi, she's like, why would you go back to work when we have all of these jobs that pay so much? And her other issues with it are if he were to go back to work, she would have to say no to a lot more opportunities, which I understand. But isn't that what marriage is? Isn't that what compromise is? Like, if you have to take on less opportunities so that he can do his job, that's the push and pull in a relationship. Her point is the jobs that I'd have to turn down pay a lot more than the job that you would be doing. But again, it's not about money. And it's not like you guys are lacking, right? Like you guys seem like you have a lot of money. So it shouldn't really be about money, but to her it is. For him, he loves being with the kids, but he feels like he's losing a part of himself and a sense of purpose. And I feel like that's so valid. Like, I feel like even stay-at-home moms feel that way, right? I mean, like there's so many stay-at-home moms within even the Bravo content creator community who ended up getting into it so that they felt a sense of purpose and a sense of self because only raising the children and taking care of the home did just made them not feel fulfilled. And I feel like that's where Bo is. And I feel like that's just so valid. So Stassi also hates the idea because Bo takes care of everything, the house, the kids, all of that. And so she's like, who's going to do that if he's not there? Well, I mean, you could hire someone, right? And I know it's not ideal. I know it's ideal to have one of the parents with the kids all the time, but if it's to make Bo happy, I don't see why she's not open to thinking about it. Well, I know why, and it's because Stassi is so, so incredibly selfish. That is just our girl, right? And that's it. So we move on to a scene with Georgie and Rob, right? So Georgie is Stassi's sister, Rob is Beau's best friend. These two are apparently buddies. They get together for a coffee. Now, in terms of any relationship between them, Georgie said she's never really looked at him like that. Rob says that they both do look at each other like that, but he's never crossed the line because that's Stassi's sister. But then we get like this cut scene that they don't seem to be aware of as being filmed, where the two of them are walking down the stairs and say something like, no one knows we've been hooking up for the past 6 months, right? And Georgie says, can I sit on you? And I'm like, what? So I think they're just learning reality TV a little bit here because it's clear that they don't always know when they're being mic'd and they're learning the ramifications of lying in a confessional. But regardless, this sounds pretty funny and I'm curious to see it. But they both sort of feel the same when it comes to Beau and Stassi. They feel like it's their world and we're just living in it. And everything is about giving to them, them, them. And if you need something to fill your cup or something for your life, they treat you like it's stupid or not important. And I agree, right? I agree that that is the vibe that we're getting. Now, there's probably a lot more to it than that, which I'm sure we'll unpack as we get to know these characters more. But it is really interesting to see how all of the characters seem to be living, breathing, and existing for Stassi and for her business. Because everyone is integrally involved in the business slash Stassi's life in some major way. And it sort of seems like everyone's decisions center around what is best for Stassi, which is so weird. But I think that was sort of how things happened in Keeping Up with the Kardashians when Kim was the only popular one or the only famous one, and everyone else's life was sort of revolved around that, right? But that's got to be difficult for a lot of people. I don't know. So we get this scene where Beau goes over to Taylor's house and he ends up breaking down to her and crying and talking about how he wants to go back to work and how he feels like he's roommates with Stassi and how she like said, "Oh, I'll just like pay you to not go back to work." And it was a really emotional scene to see him break down in this way because you can see he's so hurt. You can see that he feels so like not an equal partner for her to make it about the money and to offer to pay him for it. And it really honestly made me sad to hear him use the word roommates because we've heard that so many times on so many other shows. And when people get to the point where they're talking about each other as roommates, it's done. And that's not what I thought was going on here. I thought they had a very strong, very good relationship. That being said, we haven't really seen them outside of little snippets here and there over the past few years. And what we see online is not always an accurate representation of what's going on in people's real lives. So, all of that being said, I was just like really sad for them because Stassi may be who Stassi is, but I thought that they were a really solid couple. And it really shows that she is just so selfish and not at all interested in the happiness of those around her, it sort of seems like. So we end up having Teddy and Georgia's birthday party. So Teddy, Taylor's wife, and Georgia, Beau's sister, who aren't really connected to each other, but this is a reason to have a scene. Now, we do get Rob and Beau making up here, which is, again, why we need to have reality TV, because these two may not have made up if not for this scene. But basically, it comes down to Rob explaining that he feels like Beau doesn't take what's important to Rob as important to him. He feels like Beau considers like fatherhood and being married and all of that to be an adult, and whatever Rob is interested in to be like trivial and small. And that's why he didn't like being called stupid and be told to grow up, because if it's not important to Beau, it doesn't mean it's not important to Rob. Beau explains that like he was just dealing with so much with like Stassi and the kids, and to see something so small and trivial being brought to his attention and being and someone being mad at him about it, that's why he sort of clapped back the way he did, because he felt like it was so juvenile. So he was like, grow up. And Rob was like, well, I felt dismissed by that. And if you would just explain to me like what you were going through, we would have been good. So basically they like figure it all out. And I really like them. They said they missed each other and they love each other. And I really, really love their friendship. I love that they've been in each other's lives for 20 plus years. And I think I'm excited to get to know more about this friendship. We get Taylor talking to Stassi about Beau's feelings because this is twofold. Taylor on a reality TV show is not allowed to not tell Stassi something that happened in another scene, right? Like that would be bad. She has to tell her what happened. But at the same time, as a best friend, she feels weird knowing this information that Beau has told her and holding it from Stassi. So she tells Stassi what he said about wanting to go back to work and feeling like roommates and feeling alone and everything. And she felt like everything was fine. So she was very shocked by this. And she's upset that it's coming to her from Taylor and not from Beau. She feels like Beau has not brought this to her attention. But I feel like he has, right? I feel like he's trying to bring it up in little ways. She's just not listening. In one way that I would say Stassi has grown is the fact that she did not freak out at Beau in this moment. She could have gone crazy, dark passenger at this party, started yelling at him, storming off, all the things. And she did none of that. She waited till they got home and she ended up having a very calm, rational conversation with him. She didn't even freak out with him there. So, in that respect, I would say I'm a bit impressed and I would say that she has grown a little bit. So basically, Beau explains he's not happy. He's just not. He doesn't feel good about himself or where he's at, and he feels like he's on a hamster wheel. Now, Stassi cannot understand that he wants to do casting when he could make money on Instagram ads and make actual money. And Beau was like, I don't like that stuff. That's not like fulfilling to me. And Stassi doesn't get that because she wants him to dream bigger. Now, for Beau, he feels like doing Instagram ads about like baby poop and like all this stuff, that's not fulfilling and it's not dreaming bigger. How is like doing Instagram stuff dreaming bigger? And this really, for me, was very reminiscent of Ashley I and Jared on The Real Housewives of Rhode Island, because it was sort of the same thing where Ashley was like, Jared, you can make so much money doing Instagram and brand deals and all of this stuff. But instead, he wanted to do the brick and mortar Audrey's coffee shop because he wanted to build something from scratch. He wanted to do something meaningful to him, even though it wasn't bringing in even a fraction of what one brand deal could bring in. And I feel like Ashley was a lot more understanding of that. Like she understood the financial aspect, but she also understood the emotional aspect that this had for Jared and how important it was for him to do quote unquote real work, right? But you don't see Stassi understanding it in that same regard. Then we talk about, a little bit about love languages, and Beau says that his love language is physical touch, but for him it's more like little moments, like giving him a hug in the morning and stuff. And he feels like Stassi's needs are completely met. That's why she doesn't seem to notice anything is going on. But for him, he feels like a 1950s housewife. And he says he just feels like he's just there alone and they're like roommates. And she's just like, I just didn't know this. I thought that everything was fine. And the producer says to her, like, now that you know that Beau was unhappy, do you sort of regret doing the show? And she was like, well, yeah, but it's too late now. Here we are. And that's why I thought that she went into this. I think she went into this, like I said, thinking, you know what? My marriage is so strong. It's so good. Nothing is going to shake us or rattle us. Not knowing her husband wasn't even happy. So I could see this show rattling them even more. I worry for that only in the sense that I really do love them as a couple and I do love Beau. But I think going into a reality show in a relationship that's in a rocky place isn't going to make it better. I feel like anytime we've seen a couple go on a reality show where they're not in a good place, they're sort of done by the end of season 1, right? So I hope that doesn't happen here because I'm hoping for a season 2 and I really do love their family. But yeah, I think this show maybe brought out something in her relationship that she wasn't even aware was there and is forcing her to look at it. So maybe it will be good for their relationship in some sense because maybe it's forcing them to have conversations that they wouldn't have been having otherwise. All right, well, that is the end of episodes 1 and 2, you guys. I hope that you enjoyed it. And you will see me tomorrow for Married at First Sight. Until next time, follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at The Bravo Investigator. Join the Facebook page and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And I love you, BBs. I will see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Bravo Investigator podcast. You can follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at The Bravo Investigator. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and join the Facebook page. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a 5-star review.